Hello everyone! We are going to work on the pincushion today. If you got a kit from me, you got a bag of polyfiber fill, a little piece of fabric with a needle and 7 pins, piece of Velcro 1 inch by 1.5 inch, some sort of neutral colored thread, a piece of fabric that measures 5 inches by 14. If you were one of the first 4 to ask for one, you also got a needle threader and a thimble, just because that's how many extra I had. So let's get started. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to use the neutral thread. I'm going to use, well, I was going to use red, but maybe that'll be hard to see on the desk. Let's go with black. Okay, we're going to use a black thread for this, just so you can see what I'm doing. First couple of tricks. When you're trying to thread your needle, cut your thread at an angle so that it has a sharper point on it. It should make it a little easier to thread. Next trick is, they make a wax that you can buy to really get this tip stiff. I use saliva. I also, not everyone does this, but I also put saliva on the eye of the needle to help kind of with the lubrication to get it threaded. So you can thread it now. If you got a needle threader, you simply take the little wire end, stick it through the eye of the needle, stick your thread through that wire, and pull it back through the needle, and it's threaded. Now take out the length of thread you want. I typically do, I don't know what that is, maybe 2.5 feet. It doesn't really matter. I would rather have too much than too little, just because I hate having to stop in the middle of a project to rethread a needle and do it again. But you don't want too much, because then the thread can get knotted on itself while you're working on the project. So now that you have your two ends together, go ahead and tie a knot or 2 in the end, just so it won't pull through our project. Okay, maybe I usually do 3. Once that's done, oh, there I go with a knot in my thread already just from knotting it. How am I doing? Okay. Get your needle to the end. First thing we're going to do with the fabric, you're going to notice that I'm kind of changing some of the steps if you looked at the pattern online, just because I don't like how she did some things. For the purpose of this project, I'm going to hand stitch this whole thing. If you want to machine stitch it, feel free to. I just won't be going over those steps. I'm just going to do hand stitching because there's some important parts of hand stitching that you need regardless of if you machine stitch or hand stitch. You always have to hand stitch some things. So the first thing we're going to do is fold your fabric in half. This is the right side of the fabric. This is the wrong side of the fabric. We always want to fold, I shouldn't say always, we typically fold right sides together when we sew. And now we're going to pin it all the way up and across. I gave you 7 pins because I tried it out, and I think 1 on each end and 5 across the length of the project is all you'll need. So go ahead and pin your project closed, trying to have all your edges even. Really doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a complete science here. We're just doing the best we can. So pins. Sorry, there's a little silence here. Try not to poke my finger while I do this. Okay, last one. Now, the part it wanted you to have a fabric marker for was to find your little middle mark here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half this way. Find out where your middle is. If you have a marker, go ahead and mark it. If you don't, you can just pinch it really tight, even put it down on the table. And if you rub it like that, when you open it up, it's called finger pressing, because it's almost as good as an iron. You'll be able to see, I don't know how well you can see it on here, but you'll be able to see where the middle is just from finger pressing. Then take some sort of ruler, tape measure, something. From the middle, we're going to measure out in each direction 1.5 inches. Once you find where 1.5 inches is, I'm just going to use a regular pen. If you have a marking pen, feel free to. So there's 1.5 inches from the middle. Now we're going to go to the other direction, mark it again. Now, from mark to mark, we have a 3-inch gap. We are not going to sew this part closed at this time. What we're going to do is we're going to start on this end. We're going to give what's called a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which means we're going to start our stitch and 1/2 inch down from the top of the fabric. So your thread's already knotted. Go ahead and stick it in through the back and then out the front. With hand stitching, you want your stitches to be pretty even in length, and then you want your stitches to be about the same length from each other also. So it should be pretty even, but once again, it doesn't have to be exact. You don't want to do big stitches, just little stitches, so that it seams up really nicely and you don't have any holes in your project later on. There's a few ways to do this. You can, sorry, doing it from behind a camera is kind of hard. You can go down through the fabric and then push it back up, which is probably the easiest way to start out. Don't forget to take your needles out as you go, because you don't want to poke a finger. What I typically do is go up and down a few times before I pull the needle through, just so that it's a little faster. But just do what you're comfortable with. When you get to about a 1/2 inch from this side, we're going to go ahead and turn the project. And now we're going to go lengthwise down the fabric, stitching it up this way. And once again, just trying to stay about a 1/2 inch from the top. And like I said, that's called a seam allowance. Different projects will call for different size seam allowances. 1/4 inch is a really typical one. 1/2 inch is pretty typical also. You'll see 3/4. And things like making clothes and quilting, the measurements are very important. In little crafts like this, not so important. But good practice. So right now we're stitching down the length, and we're just trying to get to the first mark we made. And we're almost there. I hope you are too. Okay. I am to the mark. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tie it off. To tie it off, take your needle, go through just a strand or two of the fabric right by your last stitch. Push it back up, pull it through, and you're going to put it under this thread and make a knot. Now that there's a knot right there, go ahead and go back through it again. Make another knot on top of it. That's pretty secure. but for some reason I've always done 3 knots, so here we go with my 3rd knot. Okay, now you can be assured that that will not come out. So go ahead and clip off the remaining thread. We're going to tie it off, and we're going to go do the other side. I won't bore you guys with watching me do the other side. Just go ahead and do it, and we'll get to the next step. Okay, I just tied it off at the end of our 2nd mark. We're going to go ahead and clip it. Now at this point, we are going to prepare our corners to be turned. The best way to do that is to clip them off. The reason we do this is there's just too much bulk if this is turned inside out. So the best way is cut it at an angle like this. Cut it at an angle on the other side. So we really skinny down this corner, and then cut off the little tip. Make sure you don't cut any of your threads, but with that, cut like that, you'll see it'll make a really nice corner now when we turn it right side out. There's different ways you cut different things. Like if you have a curve in something you're making, you make little notches, but we'll get to that later. So now that you've clipped your corners, we're going to turn this right side out. And grab it, and you should have a 3-inch wide hole in the middle to turn this out through. Go ahead and press your corners out, and you see what a nice corner that is. If you hadn't clipped it on the inside, it wouldn't be a nice corner like that. Go ahead and turn it all the way out. And do all 4 of your corners. Like I said, this isn't exactly following the pattern, but I made it the other way, and I gotta tell you, I like my way better. So the basic idea is this 3-inch gap is going to be where the pincushion is. And it had this all in the middle, but we're just going to keep it on the end, and I'm going to show you how to do a ladder stitch across this when we're done. It's also a blind stitch, so you won't even be able to see where it's closed right there. We'll just be adding to your skills as a sewer. So once again, we got to figure out where the middle is, and then where 1.5 inches to each side is, so that we can make our 3-inch pocket here pretty even. So once again, go ahead and finger press. If you have an iron, feel free to iron this. Measure out 1.5 inches in each direction. I'm going to just do a little pin mark in one of the dark parts on it. You know, you're going to want to eventually get a fabric marker so that you can just do a line all the way across and not have to worry about hiding it. I can see it because I know it's there, but someone that didn't know it was there would never see it. Plus we can make this the back side, so it's not a huge deal. So now I know where my 3-inch pocket is. Okay, next step is going to be attaching our Velcro. So go ahead and separate your Velcro. You may have to re-thread your needle at this time, make sure it's knotted. I like to figure out which way this is going to go on your wrist. It's going to look huge right now because it's not stuffed yet. We want it overlapping. The Velcro is 1.5 inches long, so we want it overlapping more than that. So I don't know, maybe 2.5 inches overlapping. center your rough Velcro. Let's say, what is that? Just estimate, but it's about a ½ inch up on mine. I'm going to take my needle and I'm actually going to put it in the back side of the rough Velcro to hide my knot, because I don't want my knot on my thread to be showing anywhere. And then it's instantly concealed. Okay, I'm going to center it on there. And then we're just going to sew. So all the way around the outside, just in the same running stitch. If you have a thimble, you may want to use it for this. Velcro can tend to be a little difficult to sew through. It's easier on the sewing machine, but we're doing it by hand and we can do it, ladies. So go ahead and stitch all the way around. Okay, did everyone have fun? I didn't. Throwing through Velcro is no fun. But once you've made it all the way around, I go ahead and stick my needle through the Velcro, but stop it before it gets through the fabric. And then we're going to go ahead and tie it off the same way we did when we were stitching the inside. Go under a couple threads of the fabric and go ahead and knot it off. And you know me, I'm going to do 3. And once we have this done, we'll move on to the softer side of the Velcro, which is a little easier to work with because the string doesn't want to get stuck in the teeth of it. Go ahead and just trim all this off. Not my best work, but it's on there, it's not going anywhere. It'll give me years of use. Okay, so if you have one side of Velcro on this side, when you wrap it around, you're going to need the soft side on the opposite. So figure out about where it would be centered. And then we're going to repeat the steps on this one. Okay, now everyone should have Velcro on both sides so that they can make their little wristband. Go ahead and try it out, make sure the Velcro stays. I'm sure it will. Now we're going to find where we had marked it, 1 inch, or 1.5 inches from the center, so we can find our little 3-inch pouch. What we're going to do now is we're going to sew off each end so that we have a pocket to stuff. So go ahead and make sure you have a knot in your thread. We don't want a knot showing anywhere, so what we're going to do is find the inside of our pouch, take our needle inside the pouch. So this is going to have a little lip right here because we sewed it up to this point. So it's probably going to fold over about a ½ inch because of our ½ inch seam allowance. You're going to take your needle inside the pouch, inside the little lip from the seam allowance, and stick your needle out through it so that your knot is going to be hidden inside the seam allowance and inside the pouch. And it looks like your thread is coming out of nowhere. So go ahead and sew your first straight line to create the first part of this pouch. Now what I'm going to do, because I don't want to knot it on the outside of it, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and stitch back. It's not going to really matter if you're on top of your stitches, just follow the same line so that we can knot it off the same way we started it in this pouch so that we don't have to see any knots. So to do that, we're going to take our needle, stick it in through the fabric. Pull your little lip out right here, since you can still get to it. And pull your needle out through the pouch. And then knot it the same way I've shown you, just by grabbing a few pieces of the fabric, knotting however many make you feel secure. You all know by now that 3 makes me feel secure. So once we have that knotted off, I will show you that when you cut this off, you can see when we're going to sew this shut, you won't be able to see a single knot starting or finishing this stitch. It'll all be hidden inside the pouch. So go ahead and repeat the same thing on this side. And when you're done with that, we'll have a pouch to stuff. Okay, once we've completed the stitch on this side, we're going to go over here and repeat the steps for the other side. So go under the lip in the pocket and out so that our knot is going to be concealed inside. Stitch down, back up, knot it in the pocket again, and then we'll be on to the next step. Okay, so now you have both sides sewn down. You have a 3-inch wide pocket in here that we are now going to stuff full of our fluff so that we can have a pincushion. So go ahead and take a handful and shove it in there. You can put as much or as little as you want in there. I'd suggest putting quite a bit in there so that when you put your needles in, you don't have to worry about them poking you in the wrist. I mean, it could still happen, of course, if you push them in too far, but just give yourself as much space in between the needle and your wrist as possible by really fluffing this thing up. And it looks like you're all going to have quite a bit of extra fluff, which is fine. Okay, mine is not going to take any more. So, the next step is, you have the seam allowance in here. It's a 1/2 inch. So we're now going to learn how to do this ladder stitch that is a blind stitch, so you won't see it. So of course your first step is going to be making sure your needle's threaded and tying a knot in the end of your thread so that we can start sewing. The basic idea for this is going to be kind of how we concealed the knot for the last one, the last stitch going up and down, how we concealed it in this little pocket thing right here. That's pretty much where all of our stitches are going to go. So we're going to start it out inside the seam allowance, right up against the edge. It's going to be a little difficult because of all the fluff, but I'm going in under this, not coming out the back side, just coming right out the top. And then you're going to go over across the way, and you're going to go into it, and you want your needle to come out inside of the seam allowance. And whenever we move down, we're going to be moving down inside of the seam allowance so that you won't see it. So go down a little bit. I don't know how much that is, maybe a centimeter. Once again, underneath the seam allowance, you'll come up through the fabric. So when you're pushing it out, there's going to be like a 1/2 inch of fabric on this side. Pull it through. cross back over. When you come back into this side, you want to try and line it up where that one came out. You want it to go in here. So when you pull it tight, they're touching at the same spot, otherwise it'll get scrunched up. I realize I'm not explaining this the greatest, so I will try and find some sort of picture tutorial online to post with this video so that you can see it done. It's also hard because this camera just won't zoom in well enough for you to see it without it being blurry. So right here we have one stitch across. If we pull it tight, it's going to make the two ends touch with the seam allowance folded in, and you cannot see the seam there because it's on the inside. So we'll try to explain it again. Thread's coming out. We're going to cross over here, go in and over maybe about 1 centimeter and poke it back out. Now we're going to cross back over here and try and line it up and go right in across from it and over about 1 centimeter. So now you can see the stitches we've done, and when you pull it tight, all the stitches disappear. And we're going to continue on like this to the end, and then I'll show you how to knot it off so you can't see it either. Okay, as you can see now we have the stitches holding it together. And just kind of push in like this and pull it tight. Once it's pulled tight, I can let go, and you can see you cannot see a single stitch on there because it's all hidden inside. So we're going to take our needle that's still attached to the thread, and we're going to do the same way we've been tying off knots. Get a little bit of the fabric just right here, a couple strands of the fabric under the needle, tie it off. This is probably one of the very few times you'll see me only do 2 knots. So we're going to go back under, same spot. Maybe if I can do it from behind a camera, it's a little difficult. Okay, once you have it knotted, we could cut it right here, you wouldn't really be able to tell. But the way to hide this is before you cut it, take your needle, push it right through a seam where we sewed it right here, and then push the needle out wherever. So I'm going to just push it out right here. It doesn't really matter as long as you have it going through the fabric. Then what you're going to do is pull, and the knot will pull into the seam, and then just cut this off, and the thread will retract back into the pouch, and it's like magic. No one will know how you did that. Okay guys, you should have a wrist pincushion, and if you got a kit, then it matches mine. If you didn't, well, we at least all have the same pattern one. And you are ready to load it up with your 7 pins you have, or hopefully more. And I'll talk to you guys soon. If this was confusing to anyone, you have any questions, please ask. The only dumb question is the one that wasn't asked. I want to help you guys. I want everyone to be addicted to sewing like me. I want this to be fun. So let me help you because I want to. I hope you enjoyed it, and talk to you guys later.